There we go. We're live. See, that was easy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Getting Personal with Compt. I'm Lauren Schneider, the head of communications. This is a show all about interviewing workplace experts who are getting to the bottom of making the workplace a more human experience for everybody, not just a better employee experience. Today, I am joined by Compt's founder and CEO, Amy Spurling. She's the one who makes the magic happen. I know.
Sparkle hands.
Sparkle hands. This will be a fun chat, especially because Amy, earlier this week, you attended the ADP Marketplace Partner Summit. That was in Florida.
Yes.
So it sounds like, because you had pages and pages of notes, that there were some really interesting conversations happening.
There were, yeah, I think it was 12 pages of notes, and thank goodness for, Google Docs, because it could be live for the team immediately, like an absolutely very powerful few days with the ADP team, because it's all focused on what's happening in their marketplace. It was all for partners. And so ADP working with us through that, giving us some insight into their direction and clarity of what's important to ADP right now, which is pretty exciting stuff.
So tell me a little bit about how Compt is an ADP partner. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Sure. So they crossed this amazing threshold in, I believe, November, where they're now supporting 1 million customers, like absolutely astronomical number of companies on their platform, biggest payroll platform in the world. They know that they're great at a lot of things, but they can't do everything. And so they built out this pretty powerful marketplace where there's a lot of different, tools, apps, solutions like Compt that integrate and work with ADP so that for a customer, they can get best in class for everything. ADP is best in class for some things, but not everything. So we, are fully integrated with ADP as part of their marketplace. And it means that we can support their customers directly as well, which is pretty fantastic.
So we were invited to be part of this summit on, I don't know if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, earlier this week. So there were 3 days of conversations, various sessions happening, because it wasn't just like a meet and greet, but actual thought leadership was happening. So what topics kept coming up? What is top of mind for not just ADP, but the partners who were also there?
I mean, very much top of mind is the push to support international, so to support customers who have people not just in the US, but globally. And we're seeing this within Compt too. It used to be back earlier in my career that a company would build a huge company in the US and then decide what is our global strategy. And are we going to go Germany first, or are we going to go to China first? And then you dedicate all your resources to that and you kind of go country by country. That's not the way the world works anymore. Companies as small as, 10, 15 people may have employees in other countries. And so there's a global strategy happening now at a much earlier part of a company's life cycle that impacts payroll, which is where ADP is very focused on this, because they recognize this. Right now, the way it works is that if you have employees all over the world, you're running payroll on different systems all over the world. It's an absolute nightmare for customers. And so ADP is trying to solve that. And they need to solve it not just with payroll, but with all the other benefits, whether it's time tracking, whether it's, your compensation benefits, it needs to be localized into what's happening in these various countries.
And that's seemingly impossible, because we see the things like laws are changing in California seemingly every 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to keep up with that state alone, and now you have so many other countries. Like if you have an employee base of 100 and 90% of them are global, that's
right.
How many vendors do you need to manage that? That's just insane.
There's so many vendors, there's so many different approaches. And when you start thinking about global staffing, it's not even just the vendors, it's what is required in each country. Some countries you automatically get health insurance, and so you pay into a compulsory health insurance, places like Canada or Europe, and different amounts in different European countries. On top of that, how do you think about parental leave? Mm-hmm. Australia, I believe, has a year that you get as parental leave. In the US, you can give 0, which is horrible and despicable and all the bad things. But it's different across different countries. Now, if you are a company who is in all these countries, what do? Do you normalize to one country? Do you try and do a different strategy in each country? How do you make sure that each employee feels like they're part of your company and part of your company culture, but allowing for that localization. It's really complicated.
So, because this is so complicated, it makes sense that an organization as large and established as ADP is going after this. So, would you say they're leading the way in the push for international? Are there other HR focused orgs who are trying to do the same thing? What does that look like?
It's happening in a few different ways. You've got companies that I think are fantastic, like Papaya Global, that operate in a bunch of countries outside the US. You've got Globalization Partners that has a different take on it, where you can leverage them to, have an employee of record in all these different countries. So there's different ways you can tackle it. If you wanted to run have your own employees, have your own legal entities in these countries, and then run payroll yourself in all these countries, that's where there hasn't been a solution to date. And that's where I'm really excited about ADP's ability to do that. There's a lot of payroll companies actually trying to figure this out right now. And we've seen it, we've heard it, kind of from conversations. But I mean, ADP, as the biggest player in the entire space, has a lot of kind of juice behind them to figure that out. But we'll see. They're also, and they know this, not the most nimble. It's really hard to move a 60,000 person organization to do something brand new, especially within technology. So there's a lot of things being figured out right now. At the end of the day, the winner is going to be the customers, no matter who it is or what multiple options you have. The ability to support one team and feel like, all these people are my people, like we've got this, but we can support them everywhere and feel like everybody is getting what they need. That's exciting to me.
Agreed. So, when you're looking at a push for international, there are so many moving parts. One of those things I think is data security and privacy, which we're also seeing become more of an issue as this cloud of AI is becoming more realistic and ingrained. There's so many headlines I've been seeing lately of AI and HR and how are HR professionals handling this and how is it going to impact the employee experience, and are we all just out there on the internet now and the AI knows everything about us? What does that look like? So security and privacy, what role does that play in compliance? I mean, if you're trying to expand globally into other countries, that's just this added layer of, is that on ADP's side? Is that on the employer side?
I mean, it's something being sorted out. So both at the Transform conference, earlier, a few weeks ago, and then even at this ADP Summit, AI was absolutely a big topic of conversation where everybody's trying to figure out what this means and how it applies. We know that it's going to have some impact, some role in every function within a company, but it's how and where, and then what are the regulatory bodies doing? I mean, there are places where there are countries that have banned chat GPT, that you have to be mindful of that. So as, a software company, you have to be careful about how and when you're integrating this stuff if you do have a global strategy. Because if you're using something that is banned in another country, that's a problem. And so it's navigating that. The data privacy and the security, I mean, between GDPR, California has their own very, very strict policies as well. Like you have to be able to meet the needs of these countries. And that means going through a lot of certification, thinking about your data privacy and your security strategy. When you're working with a company like ADP, you have to be pretty buttoned up about it because they need to be pretty buttoned up about it. They cannot afford to have a data breach or a security issue because one of their partners has a data breach or a security issue. So having that be in the forefront as you're building when you're in HR or compensation is critical. And so that's something that, we took very seriously from day one and started building that into Compt, because when you're messing around with people's compensation, like you can't have issues. Like if you're doing something that is in the benefit space, the compensation space, you have to take that very, very seriously.
Can you tell me a little bit about how this has evolved over time, since you've been in so many different companies in different roles, from CFO to COO, and looking at things operationally, but looking at compliance as well, and not just tax compliance, but within these companies looking at security and privacy. And that's, I imagine, what led you to want to incorporate that early on in building Compt? Because I would think it's easier the earlier you are, but you tell me.
I mean, it's definitely easier to build it than to reverse engineer it. That's for sure when you've got a mess. So doing that early was part of our strategy here, but it's also it also determined where we wanted to play as a company. There are areas that, there are some companies that are tackling more on the insurance side of things. That's an entire different bucket of compliance that is highly regulated, as it should be. And you need to take people's, HIPAA, privacy very, very seriously. We knew that wasn't the space that we wanted to play in. So we specifically didn't touch certain product features and ideas because you do need to have that layer of security and privacy. When you're looking at players that can move, like there's the whole, move fast, break things, tech, Axiom. That is not what you want to do when you're building an HR company, like period, end of story. Breaking things means you can't do that. You lose HR trust if what you're doing, pays somebody incorrectly or taxes them incorrectly. And that's where looking at companies who have that reputation of being very compliant, it just goes a long way for the HR leaders to sleep at night, know it's being done well. I've said it a bunch of times. I actually heard ADP folks say it in Florida this week. No one's ever gotten fired for implementing ADP, period. Like is it the, most edgy UI ever? No. And they know that, but they know it works. And, and we use ADP as well. Like we know it works. We know that the taxes are going to be done correctly. We know that the filings are going to be done correctly. Like there's a level of security in knowing that it's just done right that you don't have with, folks who didn't take that approach or don't have that history.
Yeah, cutting edge sounds fantastic, but not if you can't trust the software.
Which, going back to the AI conversation, I mean, people have been trying to build HR chatbots for literally years, and they're a disaster. Like as an HR person, they are a disaster. There's so much nuance in the exact words that an employee has used that need to be taken into account when you're responding to an employee, or you can get sued, or you're giving them the wrong information and they could end up, making the wrong decisions. Like there is so much nuance in every single word and the order those words are in. I don't see AI being able to tackle that yet. Maybe someday. We're just not there. Like this is something that even with the basic versions, it's been a mess for a long time. So I'm on it'll impact it somewhere, somehow, automate some things, but is it going to be like the human conversation instead of HR people? Absolutely not. Like, no, yeah, absolutely not. It just might make parts of an HR leader's job easier at some point if it's pulling information together, but I don't believe that AI is going to be making decisions or, HR content.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between AI and like the automation of integrations, like integrating with a payroll provider or, whatever else, which is less scary.
Right, exactly.
So we've seen a lot happen in the last, I'm looking at the calendar, 5 months, and we've seen a lot happen in the last few years for HR.
Yeah.
But big picture, what do you think? I'm going to start granularly and then I'm going to get big picture. So what do you think the rest of this year is going to look like for HR, whether that's people tech or, HR as a department, as a function?
I think it's going to be very different depending on industry. And that's the consensus that I'm hearing both from investors on the tech side, from benefit brokers who span different verticals, from the hospitality industry, and even at ADP, because they obviously manage across industries as well. What happens with the debt ceiling is, potentially going to have an impact, especially for government workers. And there could be, that could have a very negative impact there. But we've got still very low unemployment in tech. So I don't foresee there's a budget crunch, but you still have to be able to retain your people. It's all about retention is what we're hearing. And then when you start getting into more of the deskless space, so manufacturing, healthcare systems, accounting firms, so places where people are not literally sitting in an office behind a desk, you start seeing that people need to have like there's still the need for this level of personalization, and there's an even harder time to hire in a lot of these industries. So not every industry is getting hit in the same way at the same time. And so it's going to be a little bit of a big old muck, I think, for the next 8 to 12 months as we figure this out. That doesn't mean it's going to be a downturn for 8 to 12 months, but I think there's going to be a lot of sorting things out as we navigate what this market correction looks like.
So it feels like HR is always in the thick of it, and
They are.
doesn't get a break.
Literally, there has been no break for so long. Like, it's a lot for HR leaders.
Harder to answer. What do the next 5 years look like?
Because who knows, right? 3 ups, 2 downs, and a sideways. Like, I don't know. Like, HR leaders are still not going to get enough sleep. They're still going to be tasked and asked to do too many things. And it's just, it's a never ending. How do you do more with less, regardless of what the situation seems to be? And so hopefully HR will get budget for tools to make their lives easier. Hopefully they'll be able to automate some of that to where it's not just brute force effort. Because honestly, like, HR leaders need a break. They really need a break. I mean, they're coming off of 3+ years of pandemic, move to remote. How do we get comms in place for the team? How do we think about benefits and compensation now that we're in all these states? Are we going to do, anchor compensation on one city, or are we going to do normalizing it across all of these cities? And then if we have a global strategy, how does that work? Like, it's never ending. Like, there just needs to be a moment where HR can catch their breath and then keep building.
Bonus question for you that I just thought of now, that I didn't prep you with. Not scary though. Was there a conversation that you had with anyone at this summit that got you that got the wheels turning or really excited for about what's next? Whether that's what's to come with, international expansion with ADP or relationships in the marketplace or just people ops in general?
There were a couple. So actually a company that won Partner of the Year, which is fantastic. So of all the ADP partners, this company ZayZoon won Partner of the Year. That to me was really exciting, not only because I love the team and I think they're absolutely incredible humans, but because their entire platform is around earned wage access, getting people access to their pay faster. So on the, getting paid, as you're earning funds, especially in the deskless space. I think the focus of tools and the people that are building and innovating to support people who are on the lower end of the pay scale is fantastic, because that is a group that needs more. There needs to be more investment in them. And that was really exciting to me to see that ADP has a recognition of that, their customers have a recognition of this, and that there's innovation happening to support what is, quite frankly, the vast majority of Americans. And so let's have an impact there. That to me is very exciting.
Cool. I think, what was the latest statistic? It was like 80% of the workforce is frontline, hourly, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
And it's across industries and it's across pay scales. So deskless doesn't necessarily mean low wage, but there's a different need. And it's not just people sitting in technology companies in Silicon Valley or New York or Boston that need things. Like, that is the minority of most employees in this country. Let's focus on building things for the vast majority of people rather than a few.
I think that's a great note to end on, since we're talking about building a better human experience. I think we forget that the people working at companies are people with lives.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. I am going to tap you monthly to do these because I think you're just a wealth of knowledge.
Thanks.
Of course. Thanks everyone for tuning in. You can catch us probably, let me look at the calendar again, in a couple of weeks. I have another guest coming up soon. We're going to be talking to a benefits broker. So that'll be especially timely as we get into the summer. We start trying to finalize some of our plans for open enrollment because it sneaks up on you fast. So stay tuned and we'll catch you in a few weeks. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.